I might tell you stuff that you already know, but my feeling is, I remember when I was going through all this, there was a lot that people assumed that I knew because of course everyone knows this stuff, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know how, I didn't know how you were supposed to find out about this the first time, rather than people being like, wait, you don't know that already? So I'm probably going to tell you guys a lot of stuff that you already know, but that's okay, because maybe some of you don't know it. I guess the basics of applying for jobs. Stuff starts to get posted in early October. That's sort of when the earliest deadlines are. So as a rough timeline, when you are thinking about finishing up, you actually want to get all your materials together, ask for your references, that sort of thing, the summer before your last year of grad school. I have never managed to actually finish my statements during the summer, and then I start teaching and I'm like, shit, I wish I'd finished those during the summer. So my recommendation is actually, like, those of you who are planning on finishing, like, get together over the summer and like sit in a room and work on your materials together and bitch and moan about it, but like do it before classes start, because holy hell. Yeah, the earliest deadlines are in October. There is the Career Center at the joint meetings in January, which I've never participated in. I've done some of the informal interviews at the joint meetings, but if you are going to participate in the Employment Center, your applications need to be done by about mid-November. You do have to register for the Employment Center, but they've streamlined that, and now it's just on math jobs, and when you log in, there's like an extra little choice that says, do you want to register for the Employment Center? You should, whether or not the places that you're applying to are using the Employment Center or not. Like this past round when I've been applying, just none of the schools that I applied to were using the Employment Center. I think it costs a lot of money for them. But I don't know, some friends of mine had interviews at the Employment Center, so you should do it. But yeah, you have to get stuff in pretty early if you're going to do that. But there's more stuff that goes up pretty much through March. I'm still seeing the occasional new thing get posted. The job that I currently have, it's just a one-year temporary position, but I remember last year, I wasn't going to apply, but my husband got a job back in Boston, so I was like, well, crap, we're moving. It was posted on February 1st with a deadline of February 15th. So stuff goes up. And so when you're doing the job application process, basically from, I would say, late August on, you should just be checking the jobs websites every couple of days just to see what's there. I don't know. Speaking of job websites, the main one is Math Jobs, and I'll write them down in case you want to. .org. Most stuff is posted here, and I get really annoyed at the places that don't post stuff on here because this is the jobs website for mathematicians in the United States. But there are a lot of people not in the United States are posting stuff there too. Sorry, I'm not very articulate right now. So you can find postdocs in Europe there. You can find, like research positions all over the world. There's are posting on Math Jobs. There are other, if you are interested in working outside of the United States, go to whichever professional society it is of the country that you want to work in, and they should have, this is where we post our jobs. A friend of mine wanted to go back to Australia, and so there's the Australian Mathematics Society, has their own job posting site. But this one is the main one. However, some of the smaller schools, if their HR departments are the ones that are in charge of posting job advertisements, the HR departments don't know that this is the website that mathematicians use. And so you won't necessarily find those jobs listed there. So one that I have actually found, the place that I have an interview that I'm in the process of scheduling, was actually on Higher Ed Jobs. And this one is .com. You're not going to find research postdocs on there, but you will find tenure track teaching positions at state schools and community colleges. There's a lot of redundancy. I've seen a bunch of these jobs were also posted on Math Jobs. But yeah, I saw some jobs on here that I did not see posted on Math Jobs. There's also EIMS, which is, the URL is actually, it's an AMS site. But if you Google EIMS, it'll pop up. I didn't look on that at all this year, to be perfectly honest. I have never seen anything on EIMS that doesn't also get posted on Math Jobs. I don't know what the point of it is, to be perfectly honest. But these are the main ones that I know about. I didn't know about this one, higher ed jobs, the first time around, and I kind of wish that I had. But yeah, those are the sites, and you want to start checking them. I would say late August, you're not going to see much. You might see leftover stuff from last year. There's still something, I forget which school it is, but they still have a posting up from last year. I'm like, really, guys? Let me see, the basic materials that you need your CV. You need a teaching statement, a research statement, you may need a publication list, and you need your references. Not all places ask for a research statement, believe it or not. Most places ask for some sort of teaching statement, although not all of them. If a place really just cares about your research, they won't ask for a teaching statement. References are probably, I think that they are the most important part of your application, especially coming from grad school, because honestly, how many publications are you going to have, and what are you going to have on your CV coming out of grad school? Like, you're not going to have, like, invited to give keynote talk at blah, 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 like, you're not. So, like, your references are really important, and you do want to think about who you want to write your references very carefully. You want to have some people that know you well, but not everyone has to know you, like, personally. You don't have to have had, like, coffee with these people 5 times a week, you know, for the past couple of years. It helps. But, I mean, the thing is that they are critiquing your professional capabilities, not your personal capabilities. I mean, you know, if you're a jerk, there may or may not. They actually probably won't say in their reference letters that you're a jerk. I don't know anyone that would actually do that. But no, so, I mean, the point is, yeah, the reference letters are supposed to be a professional critique. So you may need to do a little bit of extra work if you don't have collaborators that are older than you, or if you don't have a teaching mentor that's been watching your classes. I'll just say a little bit, because I want to talk more about, like, what kind of references you want to get, what you want to put in your teaching statement in your CV. But before I do that, I actually need to talk a little bit more about what types of jobs there are that are out there. There are lots of different types of jobs. There is sort of the traditional research postdoc. They are very, very hard to get, so good luck. If you want a research postdoc, go for it, like, do it. But yeah, it's really hard to get, and do not make the mistake of assuming that you are going to get one. Do not make that the only thing that you are applying to. Because there are a lot of really good positions that are not quite called research postdocs, that are essentially research postdocs. Those might be called visiting assistant professorships. There's the BOAS assistant professors here are basically research postdocs. It is not very typical nowadays to be able to find a research postdoc where you do absolutely no teaching. Those are very, very, very hard to get. For the most part, you will find, if something is a research postdoc, you will have a reduced teaching load, whatever that means. So at the moment, I have a reduced teaching load, and it's slightly reduced. And I have a 3-2 teaching load. So I teach 3 courses in the fall semester and 2 courses in the spring semester. Normal faculty at my school teach 3-3, so it's not that reduced. There are also these things that are now called teaching postdocs, which that's what I got straight out of Tufts. I don't know if I would recommend that. I mean, if you get one, whatever job you get, take it. But In terms of whether I think that they're overall a good thing, I don't know. The teaching postdoc that I got was on the quarter system, and so I taught 6 courses over the course of the year, but it was 2 courses at a time over 3 quarters. And I was so busy teaching, I got barely any research done. And so I had the load that I had, the 222 load that I had was actually a full course load according to the school that I was at. So you can kind of tell what type of position it is from what the course load is. Sometimes schools will list the course load in the job posting, sometimes they won't. But you actually, most of the time they will have contact information in the job posting for hopefully not the HR department. Hopefully they will have like a person in the department, maybe an admin listed. And you can email them and say, hey, I am wondering about this position. Can you send me some more information? They have like a canned blurb that they can send you. But yeah, so there are research postdocs, there are teaching postdocs, there's combinations of them. They range from 1 year to 3 years. There's also, there are also these 6-month research positions at like MSRI or which, oh, dude, if you get one of those, good job. But so there's that sort of thing at sort of more private institutes, which are very, very prestigious. But yeah, I don't know. So yeah, there's 1 year, there's 3 year. A lot of the time what you'll get in your contract is 1 year plus the possibility of renewal, which basically means someone's gonna come watch your class and make sure that you kind of know what you're doing. And then they'll renew your contract as long as you are competent. Yeah. There is a large advantage to not having a 1 year job right out of grad school, because when you get a 1 year job right out of grad school, you are immediately back on the job market. And applying for jobs takes a lot of time. So it's sort of this perpetual like problem of, hey, I need to use all this time to apply for jobs, but I'm supposed to be using all this time to do research and beef up my CV, and so, yeah, that's something to consider when you get your job offers if you're looking at them. If you have the option of having a longer term position that's maybe doesn't look as prestigious, you want to weigh that with, well, what is this 1 year job that I have, and what are my responsibilities, and am I actually going to have time to take advantage of this opportunity and do this research, because I'm going to have all of this other headache relating to the job search. So anyways, you could also, if you wanted to, if you have a sufficient amount of teaching experience, which my recollection is that Tufts gives you that experience, you do enough teaching here, you could potentially get a tenure track position at a smaller institution straight out of graduate school. I didn't think it was particularly possible when I was applying, but now I have met lots of people who have gotten tenure track positions straight out of graduate school. These will mostly be teaching positions. But I know people who do them, they have a lot of fun, and they go all in with their students. And they're still doing research, and maybe it's at a slower pace because they have more teaching responsibilities, but you get that continuity of where you are right off the bat, which is kind of nice. So be on the lookout for everything. Just because something says tenure track and you're like, I'm not ready for a tenure track job, maybe you are ready for a tenure track job. So basically, apply for everything. It's great if you know that you just want to do research and you are not at all interested in teaching. Great, go for it. Do that. Tailor your materials to say, this is what I do and I do it really well. If you know that you are not so interested in shitting out 2 papers a year and applying for grants for the rest of your life, hi. And you really love teaching and you want to go into that, tailor your materials for that, apply to more of those jobs. They are there. That being said, all right, back to the actual materials that you need. If you are applying for research positions, you will probably need only one reference that speaks to your teaching abilities. And you can just ask someone to come observe your class, like once, and that should be fine for a teaching reference for that sort of job. However, if you are applying for a place that really wants you to have a significant amount of teaching under your belt, they might ask for a teaching portfolio. I've seen these more and more lately, which basically consists of, I kind of asked a colleague of mine, I was like, what on earth are you supposed to put on this? teaching materials that you've developed. If you have, if you're doing any sort of inquiry-based learning and you have materials that you develop for that, if you make your students do projects, some samples of student work, that sort of thing. I mean, it's basically whatever you do. Like if you do enough teaching that you feel like, yeah, I could put together a teaching portfolio, whatever it is that you do for teaching that you could put into that goes into that. Examples of student work are great. Student comments about things that you've tried, like if you are trying a flipped classroom, and you know, if you get lots of good student reactions to that, you could include those in a teaching portfolio. Yes, but more traditionally there is the teaching statement, which is sort of a combination of what you have materially done for teaching and also what your philosophy of teaching is. My recommendation for that, and everyone's teaching statement is different and everyone gives different advice about how to write your teaching statement, but my idea about the teaching statement is that your philosophy should be so interwoven with what you physically do in the classroom that if you, in your teaching statement, explain what you have done and why you have done it, that suffices for a philosophy of teaching. So my teaching statement is fairly explicit. It is, these are the types of classes that I've taught, these are the things that I've done in these classes that have worked well, this is why I have done them. Yeah, it highlights, especially because I've taught a wide range of different types of classes. I've taught all the way from like abstract algebra to like calculus for dummies is how I put that, the slow calculus. And I've said, you know, like, okay, for these level students, this is appropriate, and for these level students, this is appropriate. So you know, you want to show off in all your materials. You want to say, like, I rock and I have great ideas, and this is the cool stuff that I do, and yeah. But the research statement actually, I think, is much more straightforward in terms of writing. Again, if you're applying to, if you are focusing yourself towards the research-oriented jobs, then you focus more on your research statement, and maybe your teaching statement isn't going to, maybe they won't even ask for one. Maybe your teaching statement is just more like, I have taught large calculus lectures and I am very good at it. Because if you're going to be getting a research job, it's going to be at a large school where they have large calculus lectures and they just want you to stand up in front of a class and lecture, and that's totally fine. But yeah, so your research statement is going to be, again, show off. What you have accomplished, what you are planning on accomplishing. If you have collaborations, highlight them. People really want to see if you manage to network outside of your institution, which, again, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Yeah. My research statement, honestly, at the moment, I think is pretty terrible, but like I said, I've been teaching a lot, so I haven't been researching as much the past couple years, but I know that's something that I need to work on. But also, I am branding myself more as a teacher when I apply to jobs. If you have absolutely no idea which type of job you want to get, that's totally fine. Make 2 versions of everything and apply for everything. Seriously, you do. The only danger is if you try to make one set of materials that makes you seem awesome at everything, I mean, yeah, your materials should make you seem awesome at everything, but you can't, they have to be such, they need to be brief, and they need to highlight the best things. So if you're doing only one version of them, it's entirely likely that when you send them off to a teaching school, they will be like, there is way too much research on here. Like, I don't know if this person is really focused on teaching. And if you send them off to a research school, the people might be, there's kind of too much teaching on here. I don't know if this person is really focused on their research. So my advice, and what I know that people have done, and I have done too, is tailor your materials for the types of school that you are sending them to. You don't have to have 50 different versions of them, but my suggestion is have a teaching statement for large schools where you're just going to be doing calculus lectures. Have a teaching statement for the smaller schools where you be working on undergraduate research with students, working on them one-on-one on projects, teaching seminar classes, that sort of thing. Generally with research statements, I mean, I think that if you are at the point where you are applying to these very elite research-only postdocs, you will want to have a seriously complicated, my research kicks ass and is really complicated and only 5 people in the world are going to be able to read this research statement. If you're applying to that sort of job, that's the kind of research statement that you want to have. But if you're applying to more of the middle-of-the-road positions that want you to have some research and also want the teaching to go along with it, especially if they say in the job posting, we want you to be able to work with undergrad students, you want to make your research statement more approachable. You want to explain the significance of your research, how you might think about involving undergraduates in that research. Generally tone it down a little bit, the same way that you would if you were giving a talk at a place where you know that there are non-specialists. So I think, you know, if you are more research-oriented, I think having 2 different research statements would not be out of order. But like I said, this is why you want to do this stuff the summer before you're applying, so that you really can take the time to do this sort of thing well. Some places ask for a publication list. I have heard different versions of whether you should or should not include your dissertation on your publication list. I think the idea is if you have real publications, there's no point in putting your dissertation on your publication list. I think coming straight out of grad school, it is considered acceptable. However, for your second, if you get like a postdoc out of grad school, especially if it's more than 1 year, the next round of applications, the dissertation comes off of the publication list. It comes off of the CV. What else? References. It is entirely acceptable to email an expert in your field with a preprint or a paper and say, this is my work. I am applying for jobs. Would you consider writing me a letter of reference? Believe it or not. Ideally, this would be someone that your advisor knows, at least semi, professionally, maybe not personally, and they can make that introduction for you. But especially if there's someone whose work you have been, like if your work is very related to someone else's work, it is totally acceptable to email them a paper or a preprint or something and say, this is my work, would you consider writing me a reference letter? They might say no. But generally, people are pretty nice. The point behind, especially the research reference letters, is just to have someone who is qualified to vouch for you. That's the point. Of course, your advisor is going to write you a reference letter. Coming out of grad school, that is the most important reference letter, so do not piss off your advisor. Don't. It's a bad idea. In terms of teaching reference letters, invite someone to come observe your class. Maybe, do that and then have a discussion with them, things that you did well, things that you did poorly. If it doesn't go so well, get their critique and then improve on that and then invite them again. But this is where getting references is where you have to start to if you haven't already, come out of your shell and ask other people to vouch for you. Which I found very intimidating when I did that. Because I was like, can you tell everyone I rock? Thanks. But yeah, it's totally acceptable, and now I'm kind of on the other end of that. I have undergraduate students who have had me for classes, and they're like, hey, I need a reference letter for, applying to this summer program or something. And I'm usually delighted to give them a reference letter. Have I missed anything in terms of just like nuts and bolts of applying to jobs? There's so much more I can talk about. My sort of like micromanaging, finger poking wants to tell you guys to like have a summer workshop or something where you get together and work on your application materials. Do ask people in the department to look at your reference material, your statements before you send them in, get critique on it. I did that and I got a lot of like, yeah, this is fine. So maybe like ask them to read it and schedule a meeting to be like, hey, let's talk about this. Like, what did you get out of it? And what were the high points and the low points? Like you might have to poke them to get some more detailed comments on it. Read each other's materials. If you know people who have recently been through this, get them to read your materials. I guess I'll do that for you guys. That's how busy I am. I would be willing to do that. I'd say I'd send you my materials, but it's better for you to write your own stuff before you go look at other people's stuff. With the exception of the CV. Go to people's websites and find their CVs on their websites and see what they put on their CVs and go from that. If there's people who have a job that you're like, yeah, I want to get that job, put the same sort of stuff on your CV. Also, if you are in the first couple of years of graduate school, looking at other people's CVs is a really good way to get a plan for what you're supposed to be doing in the next couple of years. Yeah. In general, what goes on your CV? Basic stuff, education, publications, any major talks that you've given. Although coming out of graduate school, I think you should just slap all the talks on there and then like next round, you know, maybe take some of the less impressive ones off. Any awards that you've received. I also included, when I was coming straight out of graduate school, some awards that I received in undergrad that were, again, only the really impressive ones. You can leave those on a little bit. Any service that you have done. It is very impressive for people to have done either departmental or community service in the mathematical community as a graduate student. That will make you kind of stand out. If you have volunteered in after-school programs, or if you're an officer for a student organization, that is service. I wouldn't put down just volunteering at a food bank. I think that really you want to keep your CV isolated to the mathematically related stuff. But certainly volunteering with high school students is definitely relevant if you do summer programs, that sort of thing. I posted conferences that I attended, especially like the longer workshops that you go to where you're like actually learning special stuff with specialists. Anything extra that's relevant, I think. One of the things that Sarah had asked me about was whether if you have a miscellaneous category to describe your extracurriculars. I mean, if you climb Kilimanjaro, I don't think that needs to go on your CV. Like, that's awesome, and that should go on your personal website. But I don't know that it has to go on your CV. The same thing I've heard sort of a couple of different things about, like including language skills on your CV. I took mine off. If you're applying for jobs in another country where you might need to speak that language, that's important. But in general, it's not really relevant to mathematics. So I think the thing to remember with your CV is put on whatever you think is important. Have multiple versions of your CV that highlight different important aspects of different things that you do. If maybe you're applying to some teaching jobs and you're applying to some research jobs, I reorganize my CV based on which jobs I'm applying for. I'll bump the publications up to the top if I'm applying for a research position. And I will bump the teaching experience section to the top and also write more in the teaching experience section if I'm applying to the teaching jobs. It's pretty easy, actually. Like that, once you have your CV, revamping it for the different schools is actually not that bad. So coming out of grad school, everything that you've done in grad school relevant to mathematics goes on there. Even if you think it's kind of stupid, just put it on. Unless your CV turns into like 5 pages, in which case, congratulations, you've been really busy, and then you start to need to weed it down. Once you are out of grad school and you're going into that next round of jobs, however, especially if you get a multi-year postdoc, the less important stuff from grad school starts to come off. So at this point, I only have, I don't have all the conferences that I've gone to. I have sort of my favorite ones up there, maybe ones that are more unusual that I've gone to. I put up there, like I went to this thing at MSRI that I'm just like always going to keep on my CV because I was like, yes, that, I love that. And it was on like diversity and graduate studies and everything, and it was like, oh, it's an awesome conference because it's a conversation starter. When people see that on my CV, when they're looking through it, they say, oh, hey, you went to this. This is something that you care about. Like, let's talk about this. It's one of those like hot button issues that people want to see. So yeah, think of your CV as showing off, as a conversation starter, and yeah, the important stuff goes on there, and you have to remember that the unimportant stuff, you can't put so much unimportant stuff on there that it starts to overwhelm the important stuff. So in terms of like what to keep off your CV, that's what you should think about, is like, is there so much on here that people are gonna miss the important stuff that's on here? But in general, everything goes on. Okay. Do you guys have more questions about, like, do you guys have any, is there anything that I didn't cover in terms of like the job application process?
many jobs did you apply to?
The first, when I was coming out of Tufts, I applied to over 60 jobs, and I had 60 more on my list of possible apply to. And this was, I was applying everywhere. I was applying to, I actually did not apply to a lot of the tenure track positions that I saw because I selected myself out of those, which is probably a mistake. So I probably should have applied to closer to 80 or 90.
Out of the 60, how many interviews did you get?
1. And I got the job. I got my job relatively early that year too. I think I got my job offer on February 4th. So there are the interviews at the joint meetings sort of whenever in January they decide to hold the joint meetings, which is getting later and later, which really pissed me off. But then job offers start happening February, March, April, May. I know a guy who got a tenure track research job at a good school in July. So, yeah. But basically your last year of grad school, your job is to finish writing your dissertation. I also recommend that you have most of that done in the summer before your last year. And apply for jobs. That's your job. It's a good idea to go give talks at a lot of places to get your face out there. You can invite yourself to seminars. I didn't know this. You can like email the organizers of a seminar that you see at a school that you're like, hey, I'm applying there, and you can email them and be like, hi, I'm applying for jobs and I do research in your area, and can I come talk at your seminar? It's not rude. You can just do that. I mean, it's nice if you know your advisor makes the introduction, but don't assume that your advisor is going to make the introduction. You can do that for yourself too. Yeah. This last time around. So when I applied for my job at Boston College, that was the only application that I sent in because I had another year on my postdoc that I could have taken, and I was like, well, I'm not going to apply to random bullshit stuff that I don't want. This time around, because I have to stay around Boston, I think that I only sent in probably a dozen applications because there just wasn't that much around here, and most of the stuff around here at the moment, they want applied mathematicians and statisticians to expand their departments. And I, so far, had 2 interviews, in-person interviews. Yeah, so it varies, but cast out a wide net. The job that I got out of Tufts, I did not think I had a snowball's chance in hell of working at that school. But the thing that happened was that they had a new type of position that they weren't specifically advertising that I was a perfect fit for. So even though when I applied for this position, which I thought was a research postdoc, and the school, the research that people did there was not a particularly good fit for me, I applied anyways just to be like, whatever, here, have my application. I got a different job that they weren't advertising. So apply everywhere. Apply everywhere. You never know. Yeah. It is a hellish emotional roller coaster. Don't do it alone. Have people to talk to while you're applying. And remember that there are people in other departments that are going through this exact same process. The job process for academics is the job process for academics. There is nothing particular to mathematics. There's a couple of things particular to mathematics, but like, yeah, so if there are student groups, when I was here, there was a student dissertation writing group that I found very supportive when I was going through this whole thing. Yeah, there's more people in the math department now, so you should, it seems like you guys have a really good community, so, you know, lean on each other. The in-person interview that I have is coming up. I didn't know that I had that in-person interview until I emailed these people. I had a phone interview with them over a month ago, and I figured I hadn't heard back from them in so long. I was like, well, they don't want to talk to me. And I emailed them being like, hey, is there any information you can give me, because I'm impatient. After a month, I emailed them. I was like, not emailing. I have to email. And they're like, oh yeah, we want you to come talk. How's 2 weeks from now? So, yeah. So I went from like super hellishly depressed, I'm not getting a job for next year, to I have another interview. So it is really emotionally trying. And I know that mathematicians don't tend to talk about emotions much, so I'm talking about it now. Like, it's hell. And you will be elated 1 minute because you have an interview, and then like really strung out and nervous because you have this interview, and then, you know, like you don't hear back and maybe you don't get it, and like, Yeah, I would say if you don't see a therapist, your last year of grad school is a really good time to start seeing one. And when I talked to people, when I went to the Tufts Counseling Center, they were actually really helpful. I talked to some people there in my last year, and I was like, oh, you guys are great, thank you. So yeah, be prepared, it's rough. I could talk, I don't know what time you usually go to.
How many pages were your research and teaching statement?
Oh. The rule of thumb that I have heard is that you want to keep them under 3. My teaching statement has gotten a little bit long because I've done a lot. If I do this again, I'm going to whittle it down to the most important stuff. But yeah, under 3 pages, and assume that most people are only going to read the first paragraph of it. So put your big ammunition, make references to your big ammunition at the beginning, the very beginning. Oh, cover letters. Gee, I haven't said anything about cover letters yet. The point of having all of your written materials done during the summer is that when you're actually applying to these jobs during the school year, you have to write cover letters for every single one of them. And you want to write different cover letters for every single one of them. They don't have to be unique special snowflakes for every single one of them. Generally what happens is you have different types of, more specialized different types of cover letters for the various types of schools. But every single cover letter I've ever written, I've gone to the school's website, I've done some digging around, I see what their faculty do for research, and I try to put something in my cover letter of, I mean, you still have to sell yourself, you still have to say, this is why I'm awesome. But what you want to say in your cover letter is, this is why I'm awesome for your job. Because actually, yeah, a lot of the time the only thing that people will read is your cover letter. They won't take a look at your CV, they won't take a look at your teaching statement. The cover letter has to be good. So that's the thing during the school year that you're going to spend a lot of time doing. It sucks, I hate it. It's like my least favorite thing ever. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, the cover letter should be, you know, if you're applying to a place that's research-oriented, your cover letter should be about your research. If you're applying to some place that's teaching-oriented, your cover letter should be about your teaching. A lot of places kind of have both. A lot of these like small liberal arts schools have these tenure track positions where the keyword that I've been seeing all over the place is they expect people to have an active research program, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. And it's not necessarily that they want you doing any one particular thing in research, but they just want you to be an active member of the, mathematical community. So, yeah, I don't know. That's the sort of thing. You can really, you want to mine the job postings for those buzzwords, for like, what are they looking for? Yeah. A lot of places they say in their job application, like in the posting, it'll say, we want people with expertise in these areas. If you don't have expertise in those areas, it doesn't hurt to apply anyways. It feels like a little bit of a waste of your time, but it doesn't hurt to apply anyways. I sent in an application to Simmons, wants to hire an analyst. And I sent in an application and I was like, well, I've taught multivariable calculus and differential equations. That's what I put in my cover letter. I was like, because they want someone to, and I said that I had TA'd lots of real analysis when I was in graduate school. That's what went into my cover letter. I was like, this is what makes me a person who could get the job there. Have I heard back from them? No, but it's okay. Again, you never know, are they really hiring an analyst or do they think they want to hire an analyst? And is there going to be something on your cover letter or on your CV that makes you stand out that they're like, oh, wait, this person would be a really great addition to our department anyways. Or maybe, maybe they want an analyst and an algebraist, and this year they were like, we'll do an analyst this year. I'm an algebraist. Anyways, but, so, yeah, do it anyways. But yeah, mine those, the job postings for details. My first time around, I sent a couple of follow-up emails to department chairs when I applied after sending in my application materials. I would send an email to the chair of the department, even if they weren't listed as the contact information. You can always just email the chair and they will pass it along and say, I've just applied for this position, this is why I like your school, like, this is my experience, yeah. I would only do that for the places where you think that you are a stronger candidate and the jobs that you really want. But yeah, utilize your connections. When you are applying for jobs, you should be chit-chatting with the faculty around the department and say, these are the places that I'm interested in applying. These are some of the positions that I've seen that I'm more excited about. And they'll be like, oh yeah, I know someone there, I'll email them. And yeah, like professional connections are really good. I started, like when I was at the joint meetings, I started flipping through the program being like, where are the schools that I really want to teach at? Where are people that are giving talks? And I would just go to their talks, especially if they were giving, I mean, I'm more teaching oriented. I would go to their talks if they were giving talks on like math education and stuff to see like what is their department doing in math education. Any more information that you can get to put in your application materials to make you a special snowflake is a good thing. So they're wading through piles of this stuff. One thing that someone told me, a colleague of mine she's a junior faculty at a smaller school, is a lot of the newer faculty, they will put fresh faculty on hiring committees. Don't assume that everyone that you're talking to has been there for 10 years. Sometimes they've been there for 2 years. But it's a really good way for them to procrastinate, to look through the early job applications. So do send in your materials before the deadline. I mean, it kind of makes sense, but you know, there's like a trickle of applications and then the deluge at the deadline. And so if your application is one of the trickle beforehand, it's more likely to be read. I don't know how much, yeah, like in terms of what you'll need to do at whatever job you get, I can't like tell you because there's so many different jobs. But so far I've just had postdoc positions and it's just been, these are the classes that you're teaching, go for it. I have made opportunities for myself to be more involved with undergraduate students than was required of me because I like undergraduate students and I like working with them. The thing to remember whenever you get your new position is that, especially if it's a short-term temporary position, is you need to make an impression quickly. And that means going to events in the department. If they have department teas like this department does, you go to the department teas and you meet people and you schmooze. If they have seminars, you go to the seminars and you speak at the seminars. And you have to get your face known. Especially if you have a one-year postdoc, you're gonna need new references. And you can reuse references from graduate school, but you wanna have at least one new reference from your current position to say, and I mean, you know, think about it. You get to a place in September, and by October, you're applying for jobs again. You have like a month to meet some people. So, you know, get in there, talk to people. As soon as you're hired, if you're a researcher and there's people there with research in common, probably you've talked to them beforehand in the interview process, but get in touch with them over the summer. Start that process early, you know, like jump on it. Make the emails fly. Yeah, because one-year postdocs are rough because, yeah, you got to turn around and do it all over again immediately. Yeah. Meh. You guys have any other questions? Oh, one more question that Sarah emailed actually was, fact or fiction, taking postdocs abroad, particularly in Europe, makes it harder to get a tenure track position in the States. I would call this one fiction. I know quite a few people who have had postdocs in Europe who have successfully gotten more postdocs in the United States. The thing is that if you are in Europe at a postdoc, first off, they don't necessarily have the same employment schedule. So it might be that your job will overlap with the first half of a next job. Sometimes that's okay and sometimes that's not okay. With the temporary positions, the departments usually are a little bit more lenient about that. So if you get a postdoc in Europe, you might have to do another postdoc back in the United States before you can get into the tenure track job market. But especially like if your position in Europe is research intensive, that's a good thing. If you shit out 5 papers in a year to put on your CV, that's incredible. Of course, that will help you in your tenure track search. But on the other hand, a lot of the like if you're applying for tenure track jobs, they typically want to see some evidence of teaching efficacy. So if you are not doing any teaching at a postdoc in Europe, that might not be in your favor. Plus, there's just the logistics of they want you to come interview and you're in Europe. And that plane ticket back to the United States to interview in person is going to be really expensive. So I think partially fiction. I think that if you get a postdoc in Europe, unless it's one of the 6-month ones and you have something lined up in the US, I think that you can expect to need to do another postdoc once you get back in the United States before you do before you're applying for a tenure track position. I don't know that for a fact though. That's just what I've seen in my experience. A lot of the people that I am teaching with at the moment are on some of them are on their first postdoc, some of them are on their second postdocs. It is not uncommon nowadays to have to get multiple postdocs before you get a tenure track position somewhere. But again, like I said, there's some smaller schools where you can get a tenure track position straight out of grad school. Yeah, I don't know. Having experience in statistics and applied mathematics makes you very much more appealing in the current job market. A lot of the smaller schools are really trying to expand their applied offerings because the students get to college and they're like, I'm going to need to get a job after this. And you're like, seriously, you're a freshman and you're thinking about getting a job. But like that's what's going on nowadays. And so places really want people who can teach these applied classes so that these undergraduate students can themselves get a job right out of undergrad instead of having to get a master's in mathematics or go on to a PhD in mathematics or whatever. Because their job market is harder too. But on the upside, everywhere that I've been, people have been nice. Honestly, my impression is that mathematicians are just kind of nice, fairly straightforward people. My husband and my brother are in biotech, and the two of them are getting constantly dicked over by their bosses. And that in biology, I think is standard. In mathematics, honestly, I would say that that's the exception to the rule, and that when people get a reputation for dicking over their postdocs, you start to hear about it because it's a small enough community. So I would say you do not actually need to be super cynical in your dealings with people who are giving you a job and giving you employment. I think that you can assume that they have your best interest at heart, to be perfectly honest. That being said, it is totally acceptable to negotiate for salary, if you want to. I haven't, because they're like, we'll pay you this much, and I'm like, all right, it's fine. I went to a talk series on, it was like titled like Women Don't Ask, and I was like, yeah, that's me. And I, like, those of you who have been here since like when I was here, like, I'm a squeaky wheel. But yeah, you can negotiate for salary, especially if you are lucky enough to get more than one job offer. Negotiate for your freaking salary, because it makes a difference down the line. Sometimes the place will have a fixed budget and that's how they do stuff, and sometimes they'll have a lot of money and they'll be like, oh yeah, sure. When I was leaving Northwestern, actually, I went and talked to the chair, because I was leaving a year early. I went and talked to the chair, and his reaction to my saying, hey, I have this other job and I'm going to be moving to Boston was, is there anything that we can do for you? Do you need more money? And I was like, I'm so tempted to say yes right now. But it was one of those, like, my husband and I just did not want to do long distance for a year. But yeah, so institutions often do have more money for you, so you can ask for more. Starting salaries that you should expect. When I got hired at Northwestern, it was $52K, plus $1,000 in discretionary spending, travel expenses, whatever. I could have used it for moving if I wanted to. A lot of the time, so just like you guys have funding through the graduate school or the department or whatever to go travel to conferences, a lot of the time departments will have extra travel funding that you just kind of have to ask for beyond whatever discretionary spending that they give you. In general, it is in departments' interest to have their faculty visible in the mathematics community. So ask, Be like, hey, there's this awesome conference that they've invited me to speak and I need money. And your chair may say yes, they may say no, or they may say, oh yeah, the dean will give you money for that. Yeah, so that being said, I've also been primarily at fairly prestigious private institutions. So that may or may not be the case at state institutions. Hopefully I'll find out next year. I'm crossing my fingers. I really want the job that I have an interview for. Yeah. Oh, something I wanted to tell you guys about. Really good program. If you are of the teaching-oriented type, or even if you are of the, well, I would like to do research at an institution that has a strong tradition of having undergraduates do undergraduate research. This is a really good program. But it is only, the reason why you need to know about it now, I sound like an advertisement, it is only for people who are going into their first or second year of full-time teaching. So this would be something if you end up getting the application deadline is always mid-April. Most job acceptances get done before that. And if you end up going to an institution where you will be doing full-time or more or less full-time teaching, apply for this coming out of graduate school. The sticky thing is that they do not provide funding. Your institution has to provide funding. But this is getting to be a prestigious enough program that most institutions are very happy to have you do this. NEXT stands for New Experiences in Teaching, and it is basically, it is a professional development program for mathematicians who are of a caliber in their teaching skills. I learned about, I mentioned like inquiry-based learning and flipped classrooms. I learned about this stuff through Project Next. I had no idea what these things were beforehand. You meet people, which is super important. But yeah, it's a good program, and if you don't know about it early, you miss out on it because you can't do it once you've been full-time teaching for a while. If you get a research postdoc where you are not teaching full-time, if you're teaching like maybe one class each semester, and then you get a full-time teaching job, you can still do this after that. They really just mean it's not like years after PhD, it really is years of full-time teaching. But it's your first or second full-time year of teaching. I highly recommend, it's a little bit hard to explain why this is a good program, but I highly recommend it. It just does amazing things for your knowledge base and your professional network in terms of what is out there in the professional mathematics community, I think. All right, okay, I'll start.
Is there a set tech template for CVs, or do you just write it?
I have one that I like a bunch. I think it's on the OGSM website. Used to be.
I used it.
Okay. I really like it. I have not seen a CV format that I like better. It's a very pretty CV format. I have rigged my teaching and research statements to have a similar header with the bar and my name above it, just for consistency of my materials. I don't know how much it matters, but I like things to look pretty. Speaking of looking pretty, get an interview suit. It is not mandatory, but you cannot go wrong wearing a suit to an interview. And wear it around before you go to your interview. Don't have your interview be the first time that you wear it. Like, don't wear it to a bar or something, but like wear it in your house and sit and like don't mess it up, but get comfortable in your suit before you go to your interview. But especially if you are interviewing at the joint meetings, because they see a million faces and you gotta just put your best foot forward. And you're a mathematician, so you probably never wear that suit again until you get married or something. But yeah, interview suit, look professional, get a haircut. Take your tongue piercing out. No, seriously, like, I've been wanting to get my nose pierced for like years, and I have not done that because I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be at an interview with my nose pierced because it's Mathematicians are fairly liberal-minded, but you never know what's going to be the difference. On the other hand, I know people who brand themselves as being a little more countercultural, and that works really well for them. No, like that works really well for them if they're getting a job at a school that wants like edgy teachers. But you know, there is something to be said for being bland and generic, yet exceptional. And there's something to be said for being like exceptional, and a little bit out there. But if you're going to be a little bit out there, you better be damn good at what you do. I don't know. Yeah.
I'd like to think you could look professional without being bland.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. No, you can. Yeah. No, I like my suit. My husband has said that I look very nice in my suit. So, yeah. No, you can. But
Unbiased source.
Yeah.
I know. No, you can. But the thing is, you know, like it might not be the best idea to get like the crew cut that you dye bright red right before your interview. Yeah. Unless that's your thing. Like,
I'm just picturing this school filled with like what 40-year-old teachers think like outlaw teens like want. It's just like your high school assistant principal, but like with a nose ring, and that's it.
I've been all of the interviews that I've been part of. There have been some senior faculty and some younger faculty. So you might find yourself interviewing with someone that looks like me. That would be totally possible. I don't know.
What's your favorite math book?
I love that question is still being asked. In terms of teaching, like a book that I have taught out of that I really like, I love Linear Algebra Done Right by Axler. I love it. Oh my god, it's such an awesome book. Personally, my favorite math book? Oh my gosh. I don't know if I have one. Like Dumb and Foot.
Safe choice.
I know, it is. But yeah, my favorite book that I've taught out of is definitely that one. Oh, actually, I found a really good commutative algebra book that I like, and I was also going to teach out of it. It's Miles Reed's Commutative Algebra for Undergraduates. It's so readable. I started going through it because it's teeny tiny too. So I was like, yeah, I can just read through this. And I started reading through it as a like, hey, because I post a seminar for like senior undergrads. And I was like, and I got part of the way through it, and I was like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna use this book and blah blah blah. And then like I ended up reading the rest of it as a refresher for myself on commutative algebra. That was a really good book.